Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the programme tonight, the Congress questions the appointment of the former Supreme Court Judge Justice S Abdul Nazeer as Governor of Andhra Pradesh. With this appointment, Justice Nazeer is the third of 5 judges who delivered the landmark Ayodhya verdict to get a post-retirement job. Now, legally, there may be nothing wrong with this. It's happened in the past as well, but the question being raised is one of propriety. On the programme, top Congress and BJP leaders who are also lawyers, among others, as we look at these appointments of retired judges into what are effectively government posts. At 1:30, something completely different, the mystery of the unidentified flying objects over North America. There have been 3 which have been shot down now in 3 days. A top US general says the presence of extraterrestrial activity cannot be ruled out. Many are in a tizzy. Or is this all a sophisticated effort by the Chinese at spying on North American defenses? Now, we bring you some of the finest experts in the world on drones and unmanned aircraft and also on unidentified flying objects, UFOs. I'll also be bringing you a special report. But let's quickly move on to our top debate. The entire issue, it's an ethical one at a certain level, of whether retired judges, Supreme Court judges in this case, should take up appointments to what are effectively government jobs. So I'm joined now by the national spokesperson of the BJP, who's also a senior lawyer himself, Nalin Kohli. Thanks, Nalin, very much for being with us. Now, Nalin, with regard to Justice Abdul being appointed the governor, the point which has been raised is that perhaps it's not the best thing for a recently retired Supreme Court judge to accept this position. How would you respond?
I see the argument is an argument of convenience from the Congress party for several reasons. I mean, the first such case of someone who was in the Supreme Court being appointed as a governor goes back to 1951-52, Azhar Ali Saab. I mean, that was right at the beginning of when the democracy really, we had a government, and that was under Prime Minister Nehru. So was there a question of propriety then? What has changed? The principle remains the same, number one. Number two, this kind of an approach or politics that the Congress party is nowadays following is, I mean, they are entitled to follow what they wish, but the fact of the matter is, it's a politics of convenience. Every day, a judge, any judge in a high court or in the Supreme Court is hearing 50 to 60 matters. Now, they rule against the government, they rule in favor of the government, they rule in favor of one entity, another entity loses. I mean, one party is going to lose, one will win. Now, the Congress party now has done something. When they like a judgment, they think the court is independent. When they don't like a judgment, they say the judge is biased. The same thing they do in elections. When they win an election, they think the election commission is wonderful. The election process was great. The minute they lose an election, they start raising questions on the independence of the election commission. They are doing great damage to institution building, if I may say, and in terms of institutional credibility. And Justice Nazeer is a very fine gentleman. I can tell you many of the senior Congress people who are lawyers themselves have appeared before them and probably would vouch for that. That as a judge, he was always fair, heard everything well. He understands the Constitution.
Sure.
He took the oath of the Constitution, as have other judges, and today will be taking the oath of the Constitution as a governor. Either way, who better to understand the constitutional scheme? And what is the business interest that would take place as in the post of a governor? There's no conflict. So I think the Congress party is doing politics when they are unable to do real politics on the ground before the people to win votes.
So the point with Justice Nazeer, the point that the Congress is mentioning, there have been articles and the like. He's the third judge of the 5 judges in the Ayodhya bench to be named to a post-retirement job. The argument which is being raised is like it almost seems like a reward for those who've participated or made a judgment in what many would suggest is the most sensitive case in our history, in India's history. Certainly one of them.
Well, why would you call it the most sensitive case in India's history? I mean, there are so many sensitive cases on a daily basis. And Vishnu, as a practicing lawyer, I think every case has sensitivity or has some issue involved in it. So I don't think I would look at it as the most sensitive, but I would certainly put it in one way. That the Ayodhya case was one that had been kept lingering in the court process and certainly by the Congress party for a very, very long time. I mean, the Congress party also went on record to say it should not be heard, it will have implications on elections. But after all, it was a case. It had to be determined on the merits of the case. And it had to be determined in terms of land rights and other issues. And the court finally passed a judgment. Now, if someone is part of that bench, somebody had to be part of the bench. I mean, it couldn't have been heard in a vacuum. Now, after Ayodhya, they started attacking demonetization. On the demonetization, again, was he the only judge? Was he the only person who passed it? It was a constitutional bench. That constitutional bench had other judges, their justices have passed their view. Some places you have dissenting, some places you don't have dissenting.
But Nalin,
that's why I said these are arguments of convenience.
But Nalin, what about Arun Jaitley in that case? A very fine lawyer himself, very senior BJP leader, the late Arun Jaitley, he said in 2012, pre-retirement judgments are influenced by post-retirement jobs. So have you forgotten about what he said?
So that was a general comment. Arunji said that. And we, of course, remember that statement. In terms of tribunals, in terms of other things, he was making a wider comment. In terms of judges who have become governors, the case is very, very small. I mean, the basket is very, very small. It's hardly 4 or 5 people. So therefore, this cannot be falling into that category where you look at it from a wider perspective. And I think the case he was building was not on judges as much as he was building in terms of maybe the politics of the day, in which these kind of things fit in well, and that was an apt example.
No, but again, the argument which is raised is that the post of governor it might be constitutional, but it remains deeply political in the context of the job. And we've seen that time and time again. That's what the Congress suggests, that look, this is a deeply political post. It's not like any other post. And therefore, according to them, it's problematic that someone who's just recently been part of the legal system, that to the Supreme Court, should be a part of this political process.
In fact, I thank you, Vishnu, for that question. It's an important question and a very good question. And I think it exposes the Congress party's entire approach to the post of the governor. For them, the post of the governor is a political post. That's why they impose Article 356 again and again throughout the history of the 5 decades that they were incumbent. Repeatedly, for no reason whatsoever. And that's why you required a constitutional bench and a detailed judgment starting with Bombay and then onwards much later. So I think they treat it as a political thing. They treat it as an extension of the political party. The governor's post is not a political post in that sense. It's a constitutional post. And we must understand there's the importance of that post. If there is a breakdown of the constitutional position, if there's a breakdown of the elected government of the day, elected through the process, who finally will be the upholder of the constitution? It is the governor in the state and the honorable president in the center at the national level. So therefore, in a constitutional democracy as such as we are, the elected government or the executive that comes from that is the highest through the vote. But the government runs in the name of the president at the center and the assent is given by the governor at the state. So it's not a political post. I think the Congress party, through subservient governors and through making it an extension of their politics, made it a political post. And I think when you have someone like Justice Nazeer, a very fine gentleman whom we've seen in court also, is I think a good example of someone who understands the Constitution holding a high constitutional office.
Right.
And just for the record, I would say this as bluntly, lest tomorrow the Congress party puts an allegation on Nalin Kohli that he was speaking well for Justice Nazeer because he has a personal equation. I've never visited his house. He's never visited my house.
Okay.
We've never had a cup of coffee
we
together.
believe you, Nalin.
We've only had the occasion of seeing each other in court. And that respect for him comes from the court. So now the Congress party can't take it to another level by then tomorrow attacking somebody who spoke in his favor. Okay.
All right, Nalin Kohli, thanks very much for joining us, sharing that perspective of the BJP. I'm now joined by Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Senior Advocate at the Supreme Court and Rajya Sabha MP of the Congress. Thanks, Dr. Singhvi. Now, Justice Abdul Nazeer has been appointed Governor of Andhra. He retired very recently. He was part of the Babri Masjid trial dispute. Obviously, a very sensitive case. Do you think it was appropriate for him to have accepted this post?
Look, Vishnu, there are several facets. First of all, this is nothing to do with the person and individual. It is to do with principle. As a matter of fact, he's an excellent person. He's a gentleman. I have known him. He's a very fine judge. Nothing to do with him. The matter of principle is that we are now talking of threat to the independence of judiciary, which, by the way, people have forgotten, has been held to be part of the basic structure of the Constitution several times. Really, it means that you and I, even if we do a constitutional amendment, cannot affect it, cannot change it. Now, what is happening is in the last few years in particular, in the recent past, thick and fast, shortly after retirement, you are having appointments to political posts.
Yes.
Political and political posts. And
Yes.
second, you are having them in the context of people involved who have been involved in highly sensational political matters. I think this is the gravest threat to independent judiciary and should be discouraged. It is nothing to say that, look, Vishnu Shom did it, so Singhvi should do it also. This is nothing but political whataboutery. It has happened in the past, but let me tell you, in the somewhat distant past, not so repetitive and not so blatantly political. And let me also say that today it is much more shown about perception and appearances. I'm not here to prove that Mr. Vishnu Shom was given this because he did this, that or the other. It is about the perception of Shom and, more important, about the system of which Shom is a part.
No, but so the other point that's being raised is that Justice Nazeer is the third judge of 5, to be named for a post-retirement job. Again, that raises questions. Again, it's difficult because the intention of asking that question isn't to cast any aspersions on the judge in question, and it is his independent choice. But that is a question being asked, and it's a question being asked by you certainly. So how would you look at that? Would you make that linkage?
No, I don't think we talk of only that case, but I think we certainly talk of the fact, and there's no point talking about others. Now we're talking about a specific case. It really is the same answer. You need to avoid this. See, and another kind of a fiction and a problem created is to suggest you, oh, what's the problem? You're appointing people to judicial posts all the time. There is a huge difference. And let's keep that difference alive. Arbitration is one. Appointment to tribal post retirement is another category. These are adjudicatory, judicial, semi-judicial functions. But ultimately, if you are living in an ivory tower, I can't say, but a governorship is not a adjudicatory function. It is not a judicial or a quasi-judicial function. It's the most heavily thicket of political power. If you don't smell the coffee and you don't see what's happening around you in governorships, you know what, I mean, you're living in a different world.
So, Dr. Singhvi, Arun Jaitley said, in fact, in 2012 that pre-retirement judgments are influenced by post-retirement jobs. For whatever the reason is, the BJP appears to have ignored this, or they've forgotten about it. But is this something that you believe is right, and something which all political parties should believe in? I ask this because even when the Congress has been in power in the past, there have been governors there have been judges who've ended up as governors. So isn't there a bit of a double standard, for the Congress?
Let me be very clear. We quoted this. I did a press conference yesterday where I mentioned this. My colleagues have mentioned it. The point is, it's the principle there. Pre-retirement action is certainly determined by post-retirement expectation. Now, it's the principle which needs to be sanitized. And let me also say one thing. Beyond this, in the future, you and I can keep on giving sermons that our expectation is that we'll have a clean system. We will not have this happening. And we express fond hopes. And the judiciary can give sermons in their judgments. Nothing is going to happen unless you do either a constitutional amendment or a statutory amendment. I think the time has now come. At least you can categorize in that amendment that these categories yes, these categories no. Absolute stoppage. So there's no issue. And let me end by reminding you of a rather, tender moment. H.R. Khanna was God's good man, and he was treated unjustly for a variety of reasons. I have no doubt, hesitation saying that. The man much later became the law minister. People forget that. He became law minister and resigned within 48 to 72 hours because he was uncomfortable in his conscience with people said that, look, your stature is more than this. You don't need to demean it by being used. And there'll be always come to use and misuse. Today I'll be there, tomorrow you'll be there, somebody will be there always. It is ultimately either a statutory constitutional amendment or you need to simply, shrug it off and say, look, I'm not suited for these things.
So, Dr. Singhvi, one final question. Kiran Rijiju has said, and let me quote, the whole system is in full swing in the appointment of, the whole ecosystem is in full swing in the appointment of the governor. They should understand that they cannot treat India as their personal freedom. India will be guided by constitutional freedoms. How would you respond to that?
Vishnu, if you ignore the last 4 words, you tell me for the whole sentence, the whole paragraph, is there anything he has done about the issue at hand? Has he said anything at all about the issue at hand? I'll come to the last 4 words. Nothing. It's the same gentleman who wanted to throw basic structure out of the window. It's the same gentleman who wanted, despite 3 judgments of 7 judges, to have his nominee or the government's nominee sit as a collegium. What can I say? I think it betrays a remarkable lack of knowledge, sensitivity and ignorance about the way the judicial system functions. And I think it is being, that same lack of, the knowledge about the intricate spirit of the way the judicial system functions is betrayed in this statement. Yeah. Now, yes, I agree with the last 4 words that you can go on taking this, tom-tomming this silly point that there is no constitutional bar to appointing Vishnu Shukla as a governor.
Yeah.
Well, you decide for yourself, is that a fair answer?
Okay.
But in any case, I am suggesting that now you should take care of it once and for all. Otherwise,
Right.
you keep collectively.
All right. Okay, Dr. Singhvi, thanks very much for sharing that perspective with us. We've got some other wonderful members of the judiciary. We've got Justice B.A. Khan, former Chief Justice of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. We've got Aryama Sundaram, senior lawyer at the Supreme Court, with us at this stage. And Dushyant Dave will be joining us in a little while. Aryama Sundaram, I think an interesting point mentioned by Abhishek Singhvi over there was that for various reasons, this is the time when there is believed to be a threat to the independence of the judiciary, particularly when it comes, for example, to the selection or nomination of judges. At a time like this, what is the message being sent out by recently retired Supreme Court judges in taking a government job? Is that a fair link to make, that this is a bad time in any case to do it?
Look, there's a bad time any time for the ruling party to do anything so far as the opposition is concerned. I do not agree at all with what Dr. Singhvi said. As a politician, he will always find a bad time in whatever the government does. And in the bargain, the opposition will throw stones everywhere and hit people who don't deserve to be hit, constitutional offices which don't deserve to be attacked, only because of the attack, political attack. Let's just cut the grain from the chaff here. Let's understand what this whole issue is. This is a constitutional office. He is not a government servant. It is a constitutional appointment to be a judge of a Supreme Court. A person is made a judge of the Supreme Court because you believe that he is impartial, he is unbiased, and will dispense justice without fear or favor. Who better than such a person to adorn the office of a governor, which you must realize in India constitutionally is not a politically decision-making office, but is really an office which is meant to be an office of guidance.
No, but sir,
it's meant to be an elder statesman. It's meant to be.
That's not the way it works.
Let me finish what I'm saying. You've heard a lot of another way. Yes, you got my point. You are absolutely right. That's not the way it works. And that's why the opposition parties have been screaming themselves hoarse.
No, I'm saying that's not the way that it works. When you talk about the post of governor, sir, when you talk about the post of the governor and you say that this is a constitutional post, that might be so in paper, but governors in our country are in a deeply political decision-making process, several of which have been questioned all the time.
I think you
answered the question. So therefore, when somebody says that, one second, it's one thing to say it's constitutional, but it's a political thing. And should a judge be over there 6 months or whatever it is after he retires?
Certainly, yes. And let me tell you why. You've actually answered your own question by the question itself. You said yes, on paper. Unfortunately, what you've dismissed as paper is the Constitution of India. Yes, as per the Constitution of India, you yourself say the office is meant to mean something. You yourself say in practical terms it is being decimated and being dealt with totally differently.
Yes.
If you want it to be what it is meant to be as per the Constitution, what you referred to as paper, if you want it to be that, who better to bring in there than eminent people who you believe at least are people who are capable of dispensing justice on the one hand or adorning that office without fear or favor on the other.
Okay.
And I am saying you are defeating the very purpose of the office.
Okay. Justice B.A. Khan, if a few months after you retired, someone in the government were to offer you a governorship or I don't know, a post, for example, at the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, would you accept it? Would you have accepted it?
This is a very difficult question. I mean, judges are human beings. You don't know how they react. But in this, the present issue, this is not a question of whether it's a constitutional post, whether this honorable judge is suitable for it or is not suitable for it. That's not the issue at all. Nor is it that whether it is political or non-political. We know on ground whether it is political or non-political. It's being very idealistic to say, oh, then he will decide a constitutional matter there. He will decide only what Under Secretary of the Home Ministry tells him to decide. Now that apart, I am on a different point, Vishnu. This as a context. And that context is a matter of very, very grave concern for the independence of the judiciary, which we say is the component of the basic structure of our constitution. Context is that in recent past, we have been witnessing a sharp and a considerable erosion in the judicial functioning, in the majesty of the working of the courts, and in the conduct of the honorable judges who are holding very high positions. If you recall, you would find that 4 of the senior most judges came on the in the public on a media conference, washing the whole dirty linen of the judiciary. And thereafter, if you see, I am telling you the pattern. Thereafter, if you see, that time the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court had impeachment proceedings would not have been initiated against him. And what led to those impeachment proceedings, everybody knows, and litigant public knows, citizens know. He would have also been made a governor or something somewhere. Now, thereafter, look what happened. Thereafter, the most vocal and the most so-called assertive Chief Justice of India fell for what? Fell for a Rajya Sabha seat. And you know how he justified it? He said, I will make a contribution to the cause of the judiciary in Rajya Sabha.
Okay.
And we told him that time, that look here, an ordinary political worker can tomorrow tell you to shut up and get out. What will happen to my dignity of the Chief Justice of India position? Now, thereafter, we see this case. Now, this case has also a context. Now, it comes very fresh from some of the very important cases decided in which this honorable judge has been a party. And if you see the dimension, the exact dimension of the Ayodhya case and his being a party in that bench,
yes,
the composition of that bench had to be very cautiously set up.
Yes.
And it was set up to convey the impression that because the dispute involved between two communities, two religions. Now, you can't overlook the significance of the presence of this.
Okay, so Justice Khan, one second.
Wait for a minute. Let me complete it. His endorsement of that judgment created a very good impression. And everybody lauded the gentleman.
Okay.
And today he has washed it off by accepting a position out of all the people. You know, on a lighter vein, Vishnu, he has played a dark person.
Okay, one sec, Justice Khan, half a second.
Chupa hua Rustum, who beat everybody else.
Justice Khan, hold on. Let me go back to Arima. let me go back
where
to...
are we heading to? Well, I am saying, where are we heading to?
Okay, I get your point, sir. Sir, we need to keep the strike, Justice, we need to keep the strike rotating. I want to go back to Arya. I'll come back to you in a moment. I'm also joined by Dushyant Dave. In fact, let me go across to Mr. Dave. You know, so in the Ayodhya bench, there was Justice Ranjan Gogoi. He headed the bench. He's been made a member of the Rajya Sabha soon after retirement. Justice Bhushan, retired in July 2021, was made head of the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal a year later. And now you've got another judge, Justice Nazeer, right, who's been made governor. So, you know, how would you respond to those who say that, my God, it just seems that, you know, they've been awarded for a judgment which has suited a particular political viewpoint or standpoint, and one that this government has been backing? How does one avoid that conclusion? Can you hear me, sir? Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, Arima Sundaram, would you like to come in on that? All right, I'm sorry, I don't have him either. Do I have Justice Khan? Would you like to take that? There are three judges, three names over here.
Yeah. So 2 are in the waiting list. And you will find, if you have a look at the public reaction, you will come to know all this. That one by one they are accommodated by giving them positions. Please have some consideration for the institution, for the independence of the institution, and go by what the people's reaction is. After all, judiciary runs on public faith and confidence. If that public faith and confidence is shaken by these kinds of acts, then what do we do? Vishnu, tomorrow you may have a case there against the government before this similar judge. And do you know other thing?
Justice Khan, let me disagree with you slightly. There have been past precedent as well, and we need to keep that in mind.
No,
Justice Fazal Ali, Governor of Odisha, and then Governor of Assam while Nehru was PM. Justice Fatima Bibi was made Governor of Tamil Nadu by Deve Gowda in 1997, etc., etc.
After a cooling period of how many years? And they didn't decide any important cases in favor of the government during
that. Is there a cooling period, sir? There is there.
Immediate note. No, Fatima Bibi was picked up much later. Sadasivam, in fact, extracted the governor's position from the government. And he was offered human rights commission. Then he put his foot down. He said, no, you have promised me governor, nothing short of governor. Can this happen anywhere? What are we saying? And why are you not looking at the image of the judiciary in the public eye? What are people talking about? This is my personal gain, you make me a governor today. But what do people think of my institution? That is the issue. No.
But sir, I understand what you're saying. But when I asked you that question to you personally, Justice B.A. Khan, from a personal standpoint, if something like this was offered to you shortly after you retired, you didn't say no to it. You said, look, all human beings are different. Something like that. So I'm asking you that question again.
No, you can't catch me on the wrong foot. When the bridge comes, I'll cross it. But it has never come to me for this very simple reason. And do you know, this position doesn't come in one day. This is negotiated when you are in office, when the judge is in office.
Right.
He is in contact with the powers that be. And it is that negotiation which ultimately culminates into governorship or sonship. May I add here one more thing?
Yep.
There is no harm in utilizing the talent, the knowledge, expertise of retired judges. Our retirement age should be increased. There are our laws. Under those laws, it is necessary to appoint a retired judge of the Supreme Court or the High Court or whatever. In those cases, nobody can raise any question or any eyebrow. But in political appointments, when you are picking up from nowhere, even in those cases where statute provides for appointment of judges, there is also a pick and choose.
Okay.
We have been advocating that there must be a pool of those judges and fix a criteria, and according to that criteria, pick one by one.
Okay.
For example,
all right. So there needs to be a process, and it shouldn't be done, in the way that it's been done. Is what Justice Khan is saying. Look, It is obviously a decision where there's been a lot of comment which has been made. The BJP, for its part, says that everything is above board. The Congress said it's not the right precedent, and several personal opinions as well. We'll leave it over there. Thanks, Justice Khan, very much for being with us. We'll take a break and return with something completely different. So many parts of the world in a complete tizzy. 3 unidentified flying objects have been shot down in 3 days over North America. What's this all about? I have a special report and then wonderful guests on this topic from around the world. That's after this break. The United States has now shot down a 4th unidentified flying object, the 3rd in 3 days, with no clarity at the moment on what exactly had been downed. Interestingly, the top US general in charge of defending North American airspace said that he hasn't ruled out anything when asked a specific question by a journalist on whether these objects could be of extraterrestrial origin. We've got a super panel coming up in just the next few minutes, but first, this report on what is emerging as a huge aviation mystery. The already unreal story of US forces shooting down unidentified flying objects became even more bizarre with the United States announcing that it's downed yet another object yesterday, the 3rd in 3 days. Now, this has been described in the latest incident as an octagonal-shaped object flying over Lake Huron on the US-Canada border when it was shot down by a US Air Force F-16. For now, the top US general handling this isn't ruling out anything about its origin.
This is for General Van Herk. Because you still haven't been able to tell us what these things are that we are shooting out of the sky, that raises the question, have you ruled out aliens or extraterrestrials, and if so, why? Because that is what everyone is asking us right now.
And thanks for the question, Helene. I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out. I haven't ruled out anything at this point. We continue to assess every threat.
There have been 4 shoot downs this month at these locations. Only one of the 4 flying objects have been identified. On the 4th of February, a Chinese drone was shot down off South Carolina. On Friday the 10th, a second object described as a car-shaped object was shot down over North Alaska. On Saturday, a 3rd object was shot down by a fighter jet over the Yukon Territory in Canada. And now this latest incident over Lake Huron on the 12th of February.
First of all, the safety of Canadians is our number one priority, and that's why I made the decision to shoot down the object that was a threat to civil aviation and a potential threat to Canadians. There's still much to know about it. That's why the analysis of this object is going to be very important. But you can know that this is something that NORAD and Canada and the United States are taking extremely seriously, and we will continue to keep people informed as we know more.
So is this all a part of a larger Chinese espionage program using extremely advanced drones and balloons? It could be, but no one seems to know for sure. Beyond the February 4th shootdown, the only one of 4 incidents where video is available. The white contrail you see in this amateur video of the 4th of February is the US F-22 fighter racing towards the Chinese balloon. Moments later, a second contrail is visible. That's a Sidewinder missile which then brings down the balloon. What is worrying for India is that a balloon that looked very similar to the one you just saw being shot down was visible over Port Blair in January last year. Local Andaman and Nicobar Island Facebook news groups showed this image. Now compare it with an image of the balloon shot down by the United States on the 4th of February. They appear very similar. What is known is that China operates the world's largest fleet of drones. There are literally dozens of types of drones, balloons and airships that it deploys, ranging from small drones the size of the palm of your hand to even this ultra high altitude drones like the one you see here, designed to fly at very high altitudes near space and powered by solar energy. These can loiter for weeks over an area, providing persistent cover of an area that China wants to look at very closely. But for now, there is no clarity, none, on what the 2nd, 3rd and 4th objects to be shot down actually were. Were these spy drones, Or is there a larger mystery here on extraterrestrial involvement? Sounds unreal to even be saying it. But China now, for its part, says the US has been violating its airspace on 10 occasions with its own balloons. So, real mystery over there. What is this all about? Should people genuinely be frightened? I'm joined by Sameer Joshi, the CEO of New Space Research and Technologies. He's very much India's drone man, sort of working on a variety of different drones for the Indian Armed Forces. Nick Pope, one of the world's leading experts on UFOs, and Anthony A. Schaefer, president of Project Sentinel at the London Centre for Policy Research. Thank you all very much for being with us. Nick Pope, let me come to you first. Is this extraterrestrial or is this something else?
This is probably not extraterrestrial. I think the debate about aliens is very interesting. It's great fun, and a lot of scientists are taking it quite seriously now. NASA is doing a study, for example, and the US intelligence community as well. However, given that the first of these objects turned out to be a Chinese surveillance device, I think the smart bet is that the other ones will turn out to be espionage related too, balloons and drones. Does that mean all UFOs can be explained in that way? No, but I think these ones will turn out to be China.
Mr. Schaefer, the fact that no video has been released officially, I mean, there was a shoot-down video that was shot by somebody's smartphone, but the other three incidents, the US Air Force hasn't released video at all. Isn't that curious?
Right. It is. And by the way, I'm happy to be on with Nick Pope. I'm a big fan of his. Thank you for that clarifying statement. And I agree with him. This is not UFOs. And the fact is that the U.S. Navy has in particular captured some very provocative videos of aircraft doing things that cannot be done by current technology. So I agree with that assessment. With that said, yeah, it's very peculiar that we have not seen any what we would call gun camera footage coming out of these things. We saw what happened over North Carolina. As a matter of fact, it happened just about 150 miles from my home here in North Carolina. But normally you would see the Department of Defense being able to release very quickly detailed information, especially pictures of what happened. The way they've described it, the lack of clarity is very peculiar. But again, let me be very clear. Everybody I've spoken to include my own intelligence team, this is not extraterritorial. This is very likely the Chinese using some level of advanced to them technology relating to drones or small aperture remotely piloted vehicles.
Sameer Joshi, the question therefore is about propulsion. How did the Chinese actually propel one of these drones, assuming it is Chinese, over North American airspace? Is that the key issue that needs to be looked at?
Vishnu, propulsion is something which is a subject for debate, but largely over the years, two gases like hydrogen and helium, they are lighter than air gases, which have been used by all agencies across the world to kind of, make lighter than air objects, and balloons being one. There is also propane gas, which is used, but then it burns out. It's more to get the initial trajectory reaching to those initial ultra high altitudes. So once you reach there, all you need to ensure is that the density of the gas which you have is lesser than the density of the air at that altitude. That's why, at some level, these drones, these balloons, when they reach up to that level, their density, what they have, becomes equal to the air density outside, and they cannot climb up. But largely, we have seen close to about 60,000 to about 70,000 feet. That is about 20 kilometers to 22 kilometers, 23 kilometers is about where these trajectories, they kind of stabilize at the apogee of the balloons. Now, this, interestingly, is a gas which is got a temperature which is, not something which thermal equipment is tuned to pick up. And that's what makes it very interesting. So while you are lighter than air, you can float around. So, and if you encapsulate it into a balloon, and make sure that the gas doesn't leak out, in that way you can fly for a very, very long time. And that's what it takes, months for a balloon like this, provided it was launched from China, to reach, the trajectory what was planned over the United States.
Nick Pope, would you accept what Sameer is saying, that, there are ways of evading radar. It doesn't necessarily have to be conventional stealth technology. If you are able to mask infrared emissions, for starters, if radars aren't really looking for a particular type of object, then it's quite possible that these have been around for a while.
I think that's extremely likely, yes. And one of the big issues with all sorts of radar systems is that to give a clear picture, to avoid the screen being just swamped with clutter, they use programs, computer programs, to filter out a lot of signals. So essentially, if something doesn't behave like a conventional aircraft or something that people are expecting to see previously, these may have been missed. So what's going to be happening now is that as a matter of urgency, the United States, but other nations too, the United Kingdom, India, many other countries all around the world, are going to have to review their entire air defense network and ask the question, what have we missed? And if they've missed, what classified information might have been compromised? And what can we do to stop this happening again? And by stop it, I mean militarily, but also diplomatically. We have to talk robustly to China and to other adversaries about this.
Anthony Schaefer, the fact that, again, there's no evidence to suggest that the United States or Canada have found any debris on the ground other than what they found on the 4th of February or perhaps the day after that. The last three incidents, you haven't found any debris, at least not that we're aware of it. Again, isn't that strange? Because this was an extremely coordinated intercept. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They knew exactly what they wanted to do once that debris went down. Presumably, they would have been in the air looking for it as it went down. And yet, a couple of days later, we still don't know if they have any debris. I'm talking about the last three incidents. Isn't that, again, strange?
Oh, it is. And I think this goes to Nick Pope's observation, which he's completely correct. I don't think the United States wants to give away how much we don't know at this point, because the NORAD today, the North American Air Defense Grid, is not your father's grid. This is not the Cold War. We, the United States, relies on a tapestry of military, essentially analog and other old radar systems created during the Cold War that are now integrated with FAA, our Federal Aviation Administration, civil aviation radars. That is what we have. And since the programs have not been set up to detect these small drones, I don't think they want to reveal, that is, the Pentagon wants to reveal what we don't know. So I think that's part of the reluctance here, is to talk about it. Regarding the actual debris, if you hit one of these things, which are pretty small by all accounts, with an AIM-9X missile, it's going to tear it apart. So I'm not completely surprised they've had a hard time retrieving it. I'm disappointed that they're not taking more care in trying to bring these things down in small and bigger pieces that we can analyze. But to that point, I think the Chinese have made dramatic investments in drone technology. And I'm going on the record here with you guys, and I've done it in U.S. media, saying we're going to come to find that these are probably very sophisticated drones that the Chinese have been using for probably a period of months, at least months, that we are just now trying to figure out how they're operating. And I think that's something people are afraid to admit.
Samir, I think that's a key point. That let's talk a little bit about India. We face a huge Chinese threat. And China is the world's largest user of drones. And if they've got technology like this, to actually be able to fly a drone that far and for that period of time, right, with sensors presumably on board, then what is the technological benchmark of this nation that we are looking at? I mean, are they far superior, certainly in terms of propulsion, than perhaps any other country in the world?
I think, Vishnu, before we get on to that, we need to understand that Chinese are willing to do what no other nation does. The mere act of sending a balloon from China over the US, it's a fantastic way to mess up your adversary. It's the exact kind of, gray zones, shadiness, which a country like, China is willing to take the risk of. China got to probe public reaction and the government response with almost zero kind of risk. And in this process, it consumed the attention of US media, citizens, forced the military to dozens of meetings at the Pentagon, at the flight line, consumed 1,000+ man hours, and spent millions of dollars in military operating costs. This is a risk which China took. And this is a clear and present danger all across the world for all nations of the world. If they can do it with USA, I think they would have been done and dusted with all the countries way back. And this is a problem we are facing all across. There have been sightings all across the world. I think China is willing to take the risk into gray zones which are unaccounted for. Near space or stratosphere is one such area, which can be, you are allowed to fly low Earth orbit satellites all across the world. Nobody objects. People know. Nobody can do nothing about it. The space above 20 kilometers or 65,000 feet till about 100 kilometers is the next exploitation which is going to happen all across the world. And this is where the Chinese have, already entered. They have expressed their willingness to explore the possibilities of expanding their operations in this space. And this is where a lot of air activity in the future is going to take place in the years ahead.
Yeah. Mr. Pope, you've been associated with, you ran the British government's UFO project. Just for the benefit of our viewers, what were some of the weirdest things that you saw which actually never had an answer? Over here, we can sort of fairly reliably say that, look, there's precedent here, likely Chinese. But could you, just for the benefit of our viewers, perhaps share an example of two of something that you've seen which is genuinely strange and who knows what it was?
Certainly. We had a case, one of my predecessors investigated it, but I reopened the case. We had an incident where something actually landed in December 1980. And what was unusual about this, it happened in a place called Rendlesham Forest, is that this anomalous object, which was witnessed by several military personnel, including the deputy base commander, who was a lieutenant colonel, this left burn marks on the ground and on the side of the trees. It was briefly tracked on radar, but critically, the defense intelligence staff assessed that radioactivity levels at the landing site seemed significantly higher than the average background. So, as I say, some of these UFO sightings did turn out to have conventional explanations, but a small proportion of them we could never explain. And we, like the general in the press conference yesterday, we do keep an open mind and we don't completely rule out the case, whatever happens with these sightings that we're discussing, but we don't rule out the case that there might be something rather more exotic out there somewhere.
Mr. Schaffer, that's the interesting thing. What the general said is that, look, I'm not ruling out anything, which is an amazing statement from the top sort of NORAD general to say that, after an intercept has taken place, after they have surveyed this aircraft, picked it up on radar, they've obviously flown past it, they've obviously taken pictures, they've got various sensors up. Despite all of that, they don't know what it is. They cannot identify it, right?
Right.
And so he says, look, I'm keeping an open mind. So it is something bizarre, it's strange, it's never been seen before.
Well, I think they're saying this partially to back up what Samir said, is that the Chinese are acting out, and the Biden administration is reluctant to admit that the Chinese are essentially being provocative. So that's the first thing to remember when they say all options are open. This is not an event. These are not events, as Mr. Pope just said, relating to something anomalous to the point of where it cannot be explained. I think we're going to come to find these are explainable. But what's happening right now, and I've talked to people at the Pentagon and as well as in U.S. mainstream media, the Biden White House is trying to control the narrative. That is to say, they don't want to actually provide information that'll be helpful in resolving it, because the resolution, if you answer that question that the Chinese are the ones provoking this, that's not something they want to talk about. So when a general says that he's open to all this, yes, look, I agree with Nick. There are events which I've personally seen, and I've seen the gun camera footage that cannot be explained of real UFOs, potentially of extraterrestrial origin. This is not that. And I think this is Biden administration is trying to distract from the fact that the Chinese are very likely behind all of this.
I don't think they can manage to do that for too much longer. The journalists working on this story through the day, through the night, that's going to come out. There's no way. I really don't think that they can hide whatever it is that they're hiding for the moment. And let's use that word because they are. But it is fascinating. And let's see where this eventually takes us. It's been wonderful speaking to all of you. Thank you very much indeed.